Welcome back, everyone. I trust everyone enjoyed the workshop sessions and the opportunity to interact on a little bit more personal level. Can't believe we're almost done for today. It has certainly flown by. I'm really excited to be introducing this year's Keynote Lift Experience speaker and our final speaker for today, Mr. Brandon Marshall. Brandon hails from my alma mater, University of Central Florida, go Knights, and he spent 12 years in the National Football League as one of the top wide receivers in the game. His experiences with borderline personality disorder brought awareness of BPD into mainstream media and really enabled him to become an incredible advocate for those with BPD and mental health conditions more broadly. In recent years, Brandon has created an incredibly successful podcast, I Am Athlete, and also launched House of Athlete, a state-of-the-art training facility in Florida devoted to encouraging a holistic view of wellness. We are absolutely thrilled to have such an incredible advocate for BPD and a longtime friend of NEABPD here with us today to share a bit about his experiences. Brandon, welcome.
Emily, thank you so much for having me. Let me start over again. I don't know if my audio and my video was on, but Emily, thank you so much for having me. UCF, huh? I love it. There's a lot of us out there doing some amazing things. I'm excited to be here. NEABPD, you guys have been near and dear to my heart for a very long time. So going back to 2011 when I first received the diagnosis of BPD. I remember shooting this documentary and covering it before I went to McLean Hospital. I looked at my buddy and I said, just grab a camera and film it. I have no clue what's going to happen, but it needs to be captured and it's going to help a lot of people. And right there on campus, I went through a clinical evaluation, neurological evaluation, and they diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. And on this film, I go and I'm like, man, call one of my friends back home. And I'm like, have you ever heard of BPD? I couldn't even put the letters together, but here we are a little over 10 years later. And I wouldn't say that, life is amazing, but life is really, really good. And I guess life is amazing. Let me correct that because I now have the skills and tools to be able to cope with anything that goes on, right? So obviously, being a public figure, playing in the NFL for 13 years now, a member of the media in so many different ways, a lot of people see the good, right? But they don't always see what happens behind the scenes, the stressors and, just the things that happen from a day-to-day basis. And the thing that always gives me hope and encourages me is that I have the skills and tools needed to be able to self-regulate, to be able to deal with just the common stressors of life. Going back to 2011 when I was playing for the Miami Dolphins, I didn't have those skills and tools naturally. And as some of you guys know here, BPD, borderline personality disorder, presents itself in probably over 265 different ways, right? How it looks in me can look totally different than someone else. For me, impulsivity, isolation, rage, anger, right? Learning how to be able to, just connect with whatever I was feeling, whatever I was going through, and be able to work through that. So dialectical behavior therapy was critical for me. I learned all the skills, a lot of skills and tools needed to be able to get myself back down to baseline. Spent 3 months in dialectical behavior therapy, spent 3 months in mentalization therapy and self-assessment. It was probably one of the most magical times of my life. It was difficult, it was tough being able to look myself in the mirror and figure out what was going on. But once we broke through, halfway through, it's just like I was totally transformed. And it was right at the halfway mark when Dr. Gunderson looked at me and said, Brandon, how do you contribute to all of this? Let's work on that. Let's stop pointing the finger at everyone else and let's figure out how you contribute to the things that are going on in your life. I don't care if it's 5%, 10%, 20%, or 100%. Let's focus on that and work on that. And that's when things totally change. I think that, you have to be in a position to accept help. Not everybody's ready. It could take a long time for someone to finally realize that they may need help or want help. It's also tough because not everyone makes it. some of the highlights for me when I stepped foot on the campus of McLean Hospital was listening to the patients at the beginning. Going to those workshops. It was, actually I came at an interesting time where there's a lot of people on campus, and they had a workshop and seminars, and I was invited to go. And we had some of the smartest and brightest people in this space speak, cover things, share things. But it wasn't until the very end where um, they had a panel where it was all patients. And that's when I leaned in, stood up, and was like, wow, there's hope. Before that, I thought, that was just who I was. I didn't think that, there was anything wrong, to be honest. I thought I was just that type of person, didn't smile a lot, um, held a lot of things in. And I just thought that's how life was. And then once I got the diagnosis, and then I saw, other people stand up and say, listen, I've been here for 2 weeks and this is where I'm at. I feel really good about the program. It's already changed my life. Or people that's been here for 3 months, 6 months, or people that's, been gone for 6 years. It was a phenomenal experience. So, last thing I would share before I toss it back to you guys, and we can, go through some discussion and open up for Q&A later. When I knew there was one when I this I'm gonna tell you a story about when I realized, that this thing was bigger than me, and when I realized that football was my platform and not my purpose. Um, Halfway through the program, or maybe a little bit later, we go to self-assessment, and self-assessment is a lot of you guys know, it's a form of group therapy, and you just sit in a circle really and talk about, what's going on in your life, and you can share whatever you want to share. It's just connecting and communicating. And this particular day, there's a young lady sitting next to me, and when it was her time to share, she talked about self-harming, and the night before she was cutting herself. That was the first time I've ever experienced anything like that, saw anything like that, even heard the word self-harming or cutting. She had this bandage wrapped around her left forearm, and there was blood seeping through it. And then there was a young lady next to her that, when it was her time to share, she talked about how she tried to take her life the night before. And we went on and on and on. There's probably 6, 7 people in the group, and these stories were really impactful. They were scary, and here I was, this big, machismo football player sitting in this, and it's like, what can I do once I get through this myself to actually shed light on these things? Because I never even knew, people dealt with some of these things. I didn't even know I was suffering and suffering in silence. And we got up from that group. We walked outside. The young lady next to me went back to her office. She was an insurance broker. The young lady next to her went back to the office, actually back to school. I went to Reebok's headquarters. And some of you guys heard this story before because I've been doing this for 10 years. But this was probably the most impactful moment that I've ever had. And I realized that so many other people may be walking around suffering, and we don't know it, right? There's probably a couple hundred people. They said could be potentially 600 people on this chat today, but there's probably there's people on this chat right now that's dealing with something and are suffering and may need a lot of help, right? And so I think the work that we've all done over the last 10 years has been and even longer. Some of you guys have been doing this, for 20, 30, 40 years. I think it's moved the needle a ton. I remember leaving McLean Hospital and having my little speech ready, my little lines ready, saying, yeah, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and I want to walk the halls of Congress, and I want to make sure that we can raise awareness and take it from a taboo topic to an everyday conversation. Well, hell, we're having these conversations every single day, and it's on us to continue to control the narrative, make sure that the media is covering the mental health community the right way. This is a special time for us, and I thank everyone here that's contributed to that, because there's a lot of Brandon Marshalls out there that need you guys. So thank you so much, and I'm excited to dive into this conversation more.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brandon. So we've got a bunch of questions for you today. The first one, and you already kind of started touching on this, but earlier today we talked a lot about how men in particular with borderline personality disorder might be overlooked or misdiagnosed. And you also described kind of this machismo culture that might make it even more difficult to kind of work through this diagnosis. Could you describe what your journey was like in getting an accurate diagnosis?
Well, I think it was extremely tough for me because I was also a football player and I started playing football when I was 6 years old, right? So just imagine being in that type of environment where you're really taught to mask pain. No pain, no gain. You can't show that you're injured. You got to fight through. Actually, you're glorified and celebrated when you actually play through injury, right? So society has told us that boys aren't supposed to cry. Boys, men aren't supposed to connect with certain emotions. We're supposed to mask the pain and continue to push forward. And in football, it's the same thing. You can lose your job. If I tell this coach that I'm hurt, I can lose my job. And now what we're seeing, the last year and a half, we're seeing athletes starting to stand up and say and speak out and say, I'm also hurt mentally, or I'm struggling mentally. What are we going to do with that? Well, how are teams and coaches and organizations and owners going to respond to that, right? So I think that there's been people that's come along over the last couple of years, the Kevin Loves of the world, the DeMar Rosens of the world, that's helped men really lean into how they feel, creating spaces where it's okay to talk. We do it on our show all the time where we just do check-ins. How are you doing? 1 to 10. And it just creates a space for us to be real, right? And pull back the layers a little bit more, the curtains just a little bit more. And what we're seeing is, by us doing that, there's other people doing the same. So I'll be out traveling and there could be a handful of, there could be a group of guys walk up to me and say, man, we love your show. And, we have a group chat where we also do the check-ins, right? So I think when we see other people lean into, just being human, if it gives us the right and the okay to be human as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Brandon, you talked about how borderline personality disorder is a little bit different for everybody. For you personally, what kinds of support were most helpful throughout your recovery?
Well, first off, McLean Hospital. McLean Hospital was phenomenal. And we have to highlight that because that's a huge challenge. There's not a McLean Hospital in every state. There's not a McLean Hospital or doctors and professionals, that can get the job done in our neighborhoods, right? We need more access. So I think for me, you have to start there because that's a challenge for us. The group therapy was critical. It was really important. And it wasn't just the professionals. It was like the community that was built. I'm still in contact with probably 75% of the people that was on campus and that I interacted with still to this day. And even some of the administrators, I still have a phenomenal relationship with. It's almost as if we're all family, right? So I think being in a validating environment matters. Not only an environment where the science, you have the information, you have the education, you have the experience to help people, but validation and love is critical as well. And that's exactly what I got at McLean Hospital.
Wonderful to hear. Thank you.
Awesome. Can you describe a little bit more about your experience with mental health stigma? I imagine both on the field and off the field, this is something comes up for, a lot of folks with BPD.
Yeah. We're in a better place today, right? But in BPD in particular, I still think there's a lot of work to be done. Even for me, I can lean into it even more, right? Because when I talk about mental health, I talk about mental health. I don't necessarily always talk about BPD. because I've always felt like, if I put myself in a box, when I first left McLean Hospital, the name of our foundation, I believe it was for probably like 6 months, was borderline something. And I wanted to lean into that. And then we quickly realized that we would be doing, the hundreds of millions of people out there suffering a disservice if we didn't talk about it as a whole, right? So there's a lot of stigma out there. I think that what we need to really lean into is really educating ourselves and educating others, just the signs and symptoms, something as simple as that, right? So we're not quick to judge someone, and quick to write someone off. Because when you have the information, then that provokes more curiosity. But I think that we're in a better place now, right? Like, think about it. In 2011, when I first, stood up and said in front of the country, listen, this is what or all the sports fans out there, because it was on ESPN, NFL Network, and all the other publications. But when I said, hey, listen, this is what I've been dealing with, and it touched me, and I now want to be one of the faces and voices of it. The NFL and the team and my team, my publicist, they were like, no, this is a bad idea. You shouldn't do it. And I couldn't live with myself not being able to share my story, knowing that it could potentially save a life or two. And now you see the Naomi Osakas, the Simone Biles, the Kevin Loves, the Demi Lovatas, and so many others standing up and just normalizing it, right? I think we all deal with something. It doesn't have to be a diagnosis. It could just be, I'm struggling in this phase of my life. It's a lot of stress. Whether you're a young adult in college dealing with a lot of pressure, whether you're newlywed or going through a divorce, financial challenges, or you're thriving and you want more out of your brain. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm extremely proud of everyone here and so many others for getting us to this point in our community.
I have to say, personally, I'm so grateful you made that choice. I remember that moment.
Oh, I appreciate you.
So you've talked about stigma a lot. How do you think, if at all, racial stigma influenced your experiences with BPD?
Well, that's the reality in any industry and anything, right? Like it's we are the minority, right? So we're misunderstood, we're overlooked, and that's a big deal. I think in our own community, there's a lot of stigma that we need to continue to work on. Like, where we come from, there's no option like to say I'm hurt or lean into weakness. We don't really lean into thriving. We lean into surviving, right? So first, in our own communities, right, we have to continue to educate on what mental health is and what it means, and letting everyone understand that it's okay to not be okay. But 100%, we saw that with COVID-19, even in the middle of a global pandemic. Like, we weren't getting some of the resources needed. So that's a big deal. We have to continue that discussion. I appreciate you asking that. And it's not just in mental health, but it's in all spaces. And, thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you have for folks who struggle with BPD, their families, or anybody who wants to make a positive difference?
So first, the families, so the individuals or families struggling with BPD, whether you're living with someone struggling or it's you, I would say that it's difficult, but it's one of the most treatable disorders out there. It's hard, but you can if you have access, right? And if you do the work, you'll make it. Okay. It's hard as hell, but you can make it. To the families, I would say, um, you know, a lot of times you get the brunt of it, you feel the brunt of it. And I would say be patient. I would say also have boundaries. And I would also say be curious. Okay. Don't take it personal. Educate yourself, understand it, but know that, it's hard. Okay. So you have to do the work as well. And I think if we're approaching these situations with curiosity and love, we'll have a better chance of getting through it, stronger and better.
Awesome. Could you speak a little bit more? You mentioned that point of access, and it's something that's come up in our chat feed a little bit. Just speaking a little bit more about this idea of access to mental health care. There isn't a McLean hospital in every state.
Yeah, and not only that, it's when I got to McLean Hospital, but I also invested $30,000 a month, to get to receive the treatment needed to save my life.
Yeah.
Thank God that I was blessed to be 6'5", 230 pounds and run a 4.4, 440, and had some good hands to catch the football. But not everyone has that, right? I mean, there are people that are living week to week, month to month, and I think that's part of it. That's why I made the statement earlier, like walk the halls of Congress, right? Like we have to just do better all around in America when it comes to, how we deal with, mental health, making sure everyone has access. When we look at insurance, reimbursements, there's so much work to be done there. And even what we already have from a budget standpoint, we have to make sure that how we're allocating those funds are going to the right people, the right hospitals, the right individuals that's actually making true impact and helping people.
Thank you so much.
But there are, but I will say this too, there are other groups and clinicians and professionals out there doing some amazing things. Not everyone needs a McLean Hospital. The challenge is finding it, right? Don't give up. Don't be tired. You just have to do the work, and it may take 4 or 5 visits. It may take trying 2 or 3 different clinicians or professionals or hospitals, but don't give up. And that's a big deterrent in this space, is like, oh, I tried this therapist or I tried this hospital, it was terrible, it didn't work for me, so now I give up altogether. We can't do that. It's a process. It's like any other relationship, right? Like it has, fit matters, getting on the same page matters. And I would say that for our community as well, is like we also need, I think it matters sitting down with someone who understands where you come from and some of your dynamics. So even for you guys that may not be, everyone comes from different places and have different experiences. I think it's on all of us to, be open-minded and also understand different people's experiences that will help us help more people, right? That's extremely important. Understanding family dynamics, cultural dynamics, neighborhood dynamics. It's not a cookie cutter approach. You can't just take one thing and take it to the next person, right? Experience is critical.
Brandon, in DBT, they talk a lot about how hard it is to change behavior that's reinforced. And I imagine that you were reinforced potentially for showing anger or aggression on the field. In fact, I think you've talked about this. How do we help athletes and others understand how and when their emotions may be adaptive or helpful versus when those emotions might escalate harmful behavior instead?
Well, just think of skills and tools, right? I think first off, I was talking to a prominent NFL player last night, and he's dealing with a two major injuries back to back, and he's like, I can't wait to get back because I can't wait to have my Tom Brady moment where I tell everybody like, I told you, I told you. I said, stop, stop, no. That is the problem, right? Like you can't control that. What if? And I asked him, I said, what if you come back and hurt yourself again, right? So I think first we have to the mindset of an athlete and how we approach competition. A lot of times are unhealthy, right? And what we're reinforcing there before we can even get to the emotion and the anger, it's like, what do we think sports is? Do we really understand the business that we're in, right? Even now in high school, we're talking about Neil just past this past July. The big law was passed where collegiate athletes can now, or in some youth athletes can now monetize and capitalize off their name, image, likeness. That's a lot that comes with that, right? So we have to understand that we're in a business. We have to understand that, listen, the sport doesn't define you. It's not your identity. Okay. It's just something that you do. And then from there, we give them the skills and tools. DBT is perfect, and there's other skills and tools that go a long way. For me, I use journaling in the middle of games. Like I would literally come off the field, and before I spoke to anyone, I would just journal. And I had two things that I may be focusing on in that particular game. I remember one game, one of my focuses was just smile. Like my sports psychologist at the time, he was like, Brandon, do you know how contagious your smile is and what it does for your team and everybody around when you smile? He said, you haven't smiled in 2 games, 3 games, right? Like I was so focused and locked in on just doing my job and trying to be the best wide receiver that I wasn't even smiling and enjoying it. So I would literally that game just walk around smiling. And then I would also just write down all the positive. It could have been a terrible situation or terrible play, and I would find a positive in it. So there's so many different things from journaling to breath work. I was a big gazer. I love gazing in the middle of games as well, just to continue to focus on concentration. So there's a lot of work to be, not a lot of work to be done there. I just think first the baseline and what we think sports is and how sports shows up in our life. There needs to be conversation there, and the work that we've already done from DBT to even, visualization training. And we're seeing more athletes do that. More athletes are now embracing that. More teams are now providing those resources at all levels for youth athletes to pro athletes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I love that. And you mentioned this kind of already in terms of even just smiling or journaling. There's a whole range of tools that it sounds like you found helpful in regulating your emotions. What are kind of a couple of your go-to skills now that you use to kind of keep things regulated?
It's funny that you said that, like, you have a game plan going back to the old days when I was playing ball. I would listen to classical music, not after losses. I found that there were some sounds that just made me more anxious and more angry. But classical music helped, reading helped, journaling helped me. Also had, like, if I knew I was getting worked up in a game, I knew that I learned this little trick at McLean Hospital. If I was getting worked up, there's 90 guys in the locker room. Everyone thinks they're an alpha male and, $16 billion industry. And I'm like, man, if it ever hit the fan, just go run and jump in the cold tub. Right? We're talking about the cold tub is 40 degrees, right? So I was like, all right, because it shocks the body and it, kind of calms you down quickly. I had to do that one time in my after McLean. It was actually in the following year. So 2011 season, I left McLean in the summer of 2011. That 2011 season, I had to use that tool one time, and it worked. I remember calling, I don't know if it was Dr. Gunderson or maybe it was Mr. McBride, and I was like, that shit worked. Wow. But like tools that I use now, Talk therapy is critical for me right now. Like the same stress, and I'm dealing with the same things. Nothing has changed, right? Now running 3 companies pretty much. I don't know why I was so brilliant. I mean, I don't know why I thought I was so brilliant to start 3 companies in the middle of a pandemic, but we have a media company, apparel company, we have brick and mortar facility, and we have two open, and another one we're opening in November in Dallas, and we'll have LA and Miami that will break ground or sign leases on here in Q3, Q4. I have 67 people on my team, my staff members that we take care of and pay. So it's a lot of stress. It feels the same as football. So talk therapy once a week is critical for me. Here at House of Athlete, we teach the fundamentals of health. So I got hot tubs and cold tubs, so recovery rituals, yoga, meditation, and training. So House of Athlete, and really quickly, I should have just said this from the beginning, but what I'm doing at House of Athlete is what I wanted to see in the nonprofit sector. Okay, for me, the work that I wanted to do, the type of change. So we have an opportunity to have thousands of members and thousands of people, whether online or from a brick and mortar standpoint, come in and adopt our services and products. I think it's easier for us to bring people in. So top of funnel, when it's, hey, I want to get in shape. I want to learn how to eat better. I want to bulk up. I want to lean out. I want to add a little bit here. I want to add a little bit there. So bring them in the side of performance, and then get to the side of wellness where we talk about, hey, how do you feel mentally, right? So here at House of Athlete, like the 5 pillars that are 5 pillars, is everything for us. Number one, and this answers your question of like, what are the things that I'm doing? But these are the things that I think we all need to be doing to unlock our full potential. And doesn't matter if you're living with borderline personality disorder or not. We all should be moving. We should be training. I like to lift weights. I'm an athlete. I believe in resistance training. Some people here are big Soul Cycle fans or Orange Theory fans or CrossFit fans. Move, walk, run, do something, body weight. The second thing is fuel. How, what we're putting in our bodies matter. Both ends of the spectrum, from food to supplementation. The third is mental fitness. We have to have a plan on both ends of the spectrum, whether it's impairment, dealing with BPD, anxiety, depression, or if it's just performance. I got a lot of things going on. I'm leading teams, strategy, whatever it is. I just need to make sure that I can recover every single day so I can give myself, my family, and my team the best me. The fourth thing is recover. How many of us on this call got 7-8 hours of sleep last night? How many of us on this call, got our gallon of water today? Dehydration, if we're dehydrated, performance decreases by 20-25%, right? There's a lot of things that happen if we're dehydrated. We're talking about just pure fundamentals, right? There's so much we can do at the surface level to be better, holistically. And the last thing is tribe, right? Like, who are we connecting with? Who are we opening up with? So those 5 things is what I lean into. I'm not always perfect, and that's what we teach all of our athletes. And when I say athletes, we train some of the top athletes in the world, but also, gym pop as well, regular people. Everybody's an athlete in our heart. It's more of a mindset and a lifestyle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. I think we are out of time, but really just so appreciate your taking the time to answer all of our questions. It's truly been a pleasure. And thank you so much for everything you're doing for the broader mental health community.
Thank you guys so much.